Hello.
Record. I'm going to go live on my page. This is so 2020.
I love it.
So I deleted the business manager, but I didn't know that would remove us as admins from the page when I was getting rid of that. Okay. Anyway, here we go. We'll try to not worry about that right now. Welcome for everybody joining us tonight. I am Alexa Bigwarfe with the Lose the Cape podcast and website and blog and all of those fun things. And we are here tonight with our some of our co-authors to our newly released second edition of the book. And I actually don't have any more copies of my second edition because I gave them out. So pretend this is the second edition. Lose the Cape, the Mom's Guide to Becoming Socially and Politically Engaged and How to Raise Tiny Activists. So we are here tonight because, well, I think it's probably pretty obvious to most people why we're here tonight, but the world is just a really crazy place right now. And we actually wrote this book originally in 2018 because of the feeling that so many of us had after the 2016 election. Like, we really needed to get involved and to use our voices. And we launched it kind of, we had it, we just kind of put it out there. Our goal was to get it out there quickly and then to do more promoting the next year. And then life got crazy for all of us. And Nancy and I were looking at the book and we were like, we feel like it's missing some voices and some stories that we really want to share. So instead of doing a big push for it, then we reached out to a few more people that we wanted to have in the book to share their stories, which is when Nadia joined us. And she has written the foreword to the book. Desiree, you were in the original version, weren't you? I think you were in the original book, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, we came out with the second edition. Then Corona happened and we had a launch planned for, gosh, my months are so confusing now. I just know the world went to hell in a handbasket. I have no idea what month or day it was, but everything, it was when we were planning on launching the book again was when George Floyd was killed, and everybody remembers what happened after that time. So we moved on with the launch regardless, but we just didn't tell anybody about it at that time because we're like, it's not really our place to be talking about a book we're launching at this time. So now it's a little bit later and we've all basically decided, you know what, we need to be talking about things. We need to be using our voices. We need to be encouraging other moms. We have a little over 1 month left before the next election, and it's just really important that we share some stories and encourage other moms, despite e-learning, despite insanity everywhere, despite like 6 months of quarantine, that we have to use our voices and do something. So that's all I'm going to say for an introduction. What my plan is for us tonight is to really give the opportunity for all of us to share our stories and talk about what we're doing to try and make a difference, because everybody on this panel is doing very different things, but very important things. And I want moms to know that even if it's a very simple action, any action counts right now. So I'm just going to, what I think is the easiest thing to do, first of all, welcome Desiree, Nancy, Sarah, and Nadia. Very, very glad to have you all here with us tonight. And we are going to just start with Nadia, since she wrote the foreword, and have you tell us a little bit about your story. You can share what you wrote about if you want to, and then tell us about what you're doing now, Miss I am running for an elected office. Yay. Nadia.
Thank you so much, Alexa, and for just creating such an incredible space for moms and people raising children to just kind of come together and also learn. And yeah, so that's why I have no makeup on and my hair looks like this. I've been canvassing for the last 3 hours, and I just donated breast milk to someone at my door. So it's just, it's been like, and then my dad's like, can you give me snacks? I'm like, okay. And then my son's like, can you give me snacks? So everybody wants snacks, and I'm the snack provider. So it's nuts. Yeah, listen, I mean, I'm so happy. I actually finally got my copy. I ordered it as soon as I could on Amazon, but it took a few days to get here. And, yeah, there's just, as you said, there's a lot going on. I mean, I think none of us expected something like a global pandemic to be one of the things on our plates this past year, and currently still. And I just, for folks who are watching or listening to know, I'm in northern New Jersey, so that's physically where I'm located, and I'm grateful that we've had leadership in this state that really did value science and health, and so I did feel some of that burden lifted off in terms of that fear about these healthcare decisions. But it's been really difficult, as you can imagine. My parents are staying with me. I talked about my dad's story in the book. He was about 2005 to 2009. He was incarcerated. He was kind of picked up within the dragnet of mass incarceration as a mentally ill man of color. And even now, the way he is so impacted by that trauma, right? And it really fundamentally changed his mental, physical, and emotional health, which was also already poor to begin with. And even in this pandemic, he went outside by himself, and someone called the police because they saw this man in a shirt without a shirt, because he likes to wear this traditional kilt thing for my culture, and he doesn't have a shirt. And someone was just like, who is this guy? And you see him, he looks ill, like he looks mentally ill. So luckily the police in our town, they've been very understanding, and they came and, it was fine. But it just harkens again back to what you mentioned about George Floyd and what is happening and what has been happening, right? This is not a new phenomenon of police like a lack of police accountability. It's just, I feel like as a mom going through this time, any mom, I feel like going through this time, it is a lot of challenges. My son is in 100% virtual learning. It's absolutely not going well. But I think of moms of color, Black moms are in this context with the different identities that either we carry or society puts on us, and how that plays out in a pandemic. We know that Black and Latino moms are disproportionately being impacted, losing jobs, losing the ability to have income for their families. We know who disproportionately the at-home care, the domestic workers are, and who in cities like New York, who lost their lives disproportionately. So this is a very challenging time for everybody. It is disproportionately, unfortunately, impacting people. Not because of their race, but because of racism happening. And I know for me, I still feel very privileged in many ways of being a college educated person, being able to live in a house that there is space for us to walk around. Even in the worst part of COVID, we were able to walk safely because it was a suburban neighborhood. But I know that is not at all what everybody's going through. I have job security. That is not the case for so many families out there who are struggling to make ends meet. And the people who have been lost during this COVID crisis and are still being lost. So absolutely, and I can't wait to hear from the other panelists, the other speakers tonight about their experiences. But yeah, I just wanted to uplift that this is definitely very challenging, but a time when we really should be galvanized to stand up for our communities and for the people who are the most vulnerable and the most at risk during this time.
I totally agree. And your story is really, really inspiring, how you've just jumped in there and really use your voice. And thank you for all of that. Desiree, we'll go to you next. So I just want to talk about Desiree a little bit. I met her when I went to a conference that was kind of a conference I never expected to really find myself at. It was just something, it was I don't know, it was a business / woo-woo conference, and didn't know what to expect from it. And here I am sitting at the table, and she gets up on the stage and she starts just like speaking in this amazing speech about how important it is to come together with people that aren't like you, and to listen to people and to talk to people and to hear their stories. And it was just like, it left such a huge impression on me that as soon as I came home, I found her information. I contacted her. I was like, you have to be on our podcast. So you should recognize Desiree, because she's been on the podcast at least once, if not twice. She's been in the Women in Publishing Summit. Like, we try to talk to her as often as possible because of what you are trying to do to heal people, really. I mean, that's what it is healing when people listen to each other and talk. So your turn. Tell us more about yourself and what you're doing.
Well, first, I want to say thank you, Alexa, for holding space and allowing different women to come together to express how they are helping and to also share their stories. Because I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, right? I think it is important to understand the context in which people exist, how they live, so that you can understand how to relate to them. So kudos to you again, and thank you. I am a mother, I'm a wife, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a rabble rouser. um, and I've been in the business of politics and government and brand and marketing for 25 years. I often say battle tested and God bested. I wrote a little bit about, being a woman of color, being a Black woman in this space, raising a young girl, who is trying to find herself. And so all the work that I've done over the past 25 years, I've allowed her to try to take part in that. She's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I do write a little bit in the book about how I do try to protect her innocence as a child. At the same time, there's a reality here. I'm raising a young Black girl. And as such, she needs to be quite aware about the world that she exists in. There are going to be some people, for lack of a better term, who don't like her just because. And there'll be some folks who are ignorant and are ill-informed about how to connect with her. And so I try to bring her along to a lot of these meetings and conferences and connections that I make with folks so that she understands how important it is to connect with different people. She's also a gymnast, right? And historically, gymnastics has not necessarily been a sport for young girls of color. It is now just becoming that because of Gabby Douglas, right? Everyone was like, woo, and Simone Biles, woo, Lori Hernandez, and a number of others. And so that also is an indication, that she needs to understand the world in which she exists. And so the work that I do is really, especially right now, connecting Black and Brown communities and helping them understand the power that they yield and the history that they come from. I always say I drink deeply from wells I did not dig. So despite the obstacles, despite the craziness that we may exist in today, I don't really have the luxury of being tired. I don't have the luxury of giving up. I don't. And so, that is something I impart on my daughter, that she comes from a history and she comes from a long list of women warriors and people who have fought to ensure that she can do virtual learning in a house and have space, right? And I think those are benefits of things that people have done to position her. And so I'm excited to be here, hear more of the stories, answer some questions. But a lot of the work that I do is really trying to ensure that folks understand the context in which we exist. The other part of the work I do is talk about systematic racism. And I just want to say this, and I always talk about systematic racism. It's been very controversial whenever I talk about it, because there are many who believe that when you talk about systemic racism, that you're talking about everyone in the system being racist. And I always pause people and I always explain the difference. Systemic racism means that the system itself provides disparate outcomes for different people. And I think that is what you saw, the world saw with George Floyd. That is what you were seeing with Breonna Taylor. That is what you were seeing happen in this country and in other communities as well. And so I fight to ensure that people acknowledge that, because it's extremely important.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself there. My mouse didn't want to behave. Yeah, I love all of it. And I think that, I think that some people are going to be passionate about the cause regardless, but I think people with children and with daughters, especially, who, women of color have two battles to fight: the sex battle and the minority battle. So, I can imagine, I know that a lot of what I do when I get out there is largely because of the path that I want to create for my daughter as well. So it's awesome. And I hope that we have time to talk about the Chat and Choose a little bit more and what you're doing with that, because that's so cool what's going on with that. All right, Nancy.
Hi. I was thinking about what I was gonna say, and I was rereading my chapter in the book. So the first thing that I want people to understand is that my sense of social justice is deeply rooted in being Jewish, because it's a central tenet of Judaism to pursue justice. It says it in the Bible. Justice, justice, we shall pursue. So when I wrote my chapter in the book, it was about a concept called Tikkun Olam, which loosely translates to heal the world. And when I was rereading the chapter, I was struck by how innocent it is, you know, and that a lot of it that's in there is, I don't want to say that it's trivial, but it is definitely not as hard-hitting as the work that I've come to start doing this year, because the chapter is about volunteerism, and it's definitely, when I read it, I recognize the white saviorism in it, because a lot of volunteerism is it's about how good it makes you feel to help other people. And so in the past year, like in the time since I've written that chapter, I've really kind of grown to have a greater understanding of what white supremacy is and what institutionalized racism is on a much deeper level. So I feel like if I was gonna write a chapter for the book now, it would be a much, much different chapter. And ironically, it was pandemic that finally allowed me the space that I needed to really figure out what my role was gonna be in this fight. Because when I'm a mom of 3 kids, and as any mom knows, like, you're just so busy all the time, you're working, you're with your kids, there's only so many commitments that you can honor, you know, between driving the kids to gymnastics and driving the kids to Sunday school and making dinner and like all of this other stuff. And you really wish you could go to every single meeting and be at every single event, but you know, it's just like not realistic. So with the pandemic and everything being online, it really opened up a door in which I was able to be like, yes, I can hop on Zoom for an hour tonight, or I could do this, because I didn't have to leave the house, you know, and that's like a very real challenge and a real obstacle for a lot of people. And then the other thing is that, and I think like a lot of people, especially white people, there's like a sense of, I don't know what to do. You know, like there's a sense of helplessness because you feel like, well, I'm not that person. I would never do anything like that, but what can I do to stop other people? You know, you just kind of feel not empowered to do things because you think that doing things means going to every single protest and going to every single march and putting your body on the line. Then somebody said something, I read something on Instagram about how somebody said, you know, you just need to pick a lane that works for you, and remember that we need all kinds of helpers in this fight. We need somebody that is gonna watch the children. We're gonna need somebody that's gonna feed the people that are on the front line. We need people that are going to, you know, lobby politicians, help write policy, like all of these things. And that was like, you know, it clicked for me, you know, it was like, it felt less overwhelming at that moment when I realized, okay, I can look at the things that I'm good at and figure out how to use those skills in order to be part of this fight. And so it was through that understanding that I ended up at Surge, which is a national organization called Stand Up for Racial Justice, and they have local chapters. And Surge works with Black-led accountability partners in their local area, working with them, taking their cues from them, and sticking to their script, and just doing whatever it is that they need help with or they need support with. So, for example, in my area in the South Bay in Northern California, our accountability partners are right now focused on getting police out of the schools and general decarceration matters. So that is one of the things that I am working on. And this work has been really gratifying and seems more meaningful than anything else that I could be doing right now. So that is, so as I reflect on where I was when I wrote this chapter in the book and where I am now, it's just kind of amazing, I think. And I think that I'm not the only white person that has kind of made this slow, painfully slow transformation to a deeper understanding of how we're implicit in these issues and the ways in which we can help to, I don't think we can undo them, but we can fix them somehow.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed watching you get involved and do all the things that you're doing too. And I just, I just want to put out there that for some people right now, you may be so overwhelmed that the idea of volunteering or running for school council or running for a local position or doing whatever may feel super overwhelming to you. So if the only thing you do is make sure you order your ballot before they close them in 2 days, I think it is, or whenever it is, pretend like it's tomorrow and go. It's so easy. I filled out the form in about 30 seconds. It's that easy. If that's the only thing you do, you've done something very important on this. And make sure your spouse or partner gets one too. All right. So Sarah, you're up.
Yeah, so it's so interesting listening to Nancy talk, because I also had to go back and reread what I wrote back then. But what's sort of interesting is that I feel like since I was a little kid, I've been in this like extremely slow motion process of being like radicalized by the environment I'm in. So, I spent a long time being a complacent white person for sure. And obviously still have a lot of personal work that I need to do. And, but I think that one of the things that has really like solidified my thinking, and a lot of the work, the stuff I talked about in the chapter that I wrote, was about, I spent a lot of my life being like a good liberal, I guess, if we're going to use political labels, and I would vote in every election, and I voted for the right people. And I talked about, racism is bad, and here's a book I read, I have a black friend sort of vibes. And I thought I was doing like a really good job at being a good liberal for a long time. And I thought that I was doing all the things that democracy needed from me. And I also thought I really deserved a good pat on the back for making some calls for like presidential campaigns. Like I would get involved in those presidential years, and what a hero I was. But one of the things that really shifted my perspective, and I think it was important for me, and other people watching this might have a similar experience, is when I moved to a town where local politics really, and Nancy's lived in this town too, so she knows, where local politics really had a huge impact on the quality of education that my kids were getting. And it really made me say, okay, well, I am obviously a hero for voting for Barack Obama, but like, I need to like think about what am I doing in my local community that's going to make things better and actually take action and do something. And it can feel really overwhelming because in these local governments, a lot of times the meetings of your local council are at the time when you feed your kids dinner. And that is when they're deciding what the school budget is next year. And, you know, your kids are not going to sit through a meeting, you know, with you to listen to a bunch of people ramble on about this, how much the copier paper costs at an elementary school. And so you just kind of tag out of it. And then all of a sudden your kids' class sizes are like 30 kids. And, you know, I came to understand that this isn't like a bug of the system, it's a feature of the system. This is what it's meant to do. And this is why our local governments and our local schools are struggling right now in the pandemic, because we have let ideology, like people who come in with radical ideology, take over these local governments because we are busy. We are working parents. We have kids. We have less support as parents than we ever have. You know, we're paying astronomically for childcare. We don't have grandparents and parents living next door or down the street, a lot of us. We don't have extended family. And, you know, the expectation is that you can do it all and you need to take care of it yourself and do it on your own, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think that that really hamstrings local communities and leads to problems that are hugely inequitable. And I look at my community, which is a community of tremendous privilege, and I see that there are people in our community struggling because the assumption is that everyone has a printer at home and a Chromebook in distance learning. And our nice schools have been put in a position where they don't have money to have one-for-one technology because can't you just buy a Chromebook? And, you know, when we're allowed to tap out of these local elections and these local decisions, and when we're forced to do it because of the system creating it so that women especially, women of color especially, young people especially, are disenfranchised by the way that local governments are run so frequently, it's no surprise that those decisions don't favor children, affordable housing, you know, the best possible like mix of development and space conservation. So there's a lot of things in our local governments that really started to make me think, you know, I can do all this work, and I'm doing a lot of work on national campaigns now too, of course, like we all are like busting our butts right now. But I can't just let any Yahoo become my state senator anymore. Because the last Yahoo we had tried to make it so that parents didn't have any rights to attend IEP meetings for their kids. So if your kid had an IEP, you couldn't go in and sit and talk to the school about it. So that's a real issue of access and equity in our educational system that a lot of people weren't aware of, and you don't know it till you run up against it. So I think that's something that if there's something you can do, it's not just like right now, 2020 is on fire. We're all in the volcano. And I just feel like I've been sticking a fork into an electrical socket for a year. But like, we absolutely have the opportunity in 2021 and 2022 and 2023 to also make powerful, meaningful changes in our local communities and our states. Because there's an election every year. And in some communities, there's also a budget vote every year on whether you get to fund your schools or what your local tax rates are. And those things have huge implications for equality and access to education, access to housing, and a lot of that important stuff. So it's something that's really gotten me energized in addition to the bigger picture over the past few years.
Thank you. You too. I've also watched with your postcards and mailing and phone calling and all of that kind of stuff, and feeling like I'm not quite doing what I need to be doing to live up to the expectations. But, you know, it's interesting. I didn't share anything about my story and how I got into this. and it's a lot. It's complicated. It's messy. I mean, basically a couple of things happened. One, I was lucky enough to be raised by parents who valued community service. And that's a lot of what I wrote about, like how, and really that's the idea behind this book and behind the concept that we're doing. And for those of you who joined us late, we're talking about Lose the Cape, the Mom's Guide to Becoming Socially and Politically Engaged and How to Raise Tiny Activists. It's not even just about raising tiny activists. It's about raising children who also carry the same torch that we carry to do better in our world. And that started with my parents. At a very young age, we always did things like, it's sad you can't do these things anymore like we used to do back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where we would actually prepare an entire Thanksgiving meal for a family in need and deliver it to their house. Or we would, do, instead of just adopting a family and leaving a Christmas tree leaving Christmas presents at a center where you never saw them, like we actually took the gifts to their homes. And to me, that was so tremendously impactful. So we were doing a lot of those things as a kid, but I lived overseas because my dad was in the Army. So being exposed to different cultures had a big impact. But I was still a hardcore Republican, y'all. Everybody in our family this was the way we were raised. This is what we did. And I was starting to feel this shift inside of myself, but I didn't know how to do anything about it. Raised in South Carolina in a very diverse area, that racism was never an issue, but there were a lot of other things I wasn't sure about what I felt about. And I'll never forget. And you know what? This is why it's important to hold your friends accountable and to call them out and to have important conversations, because I'm going to embarrass myself here, but I'm going to say that when Obama ran against McCain, I voted for McCain, and I remember saying something about it. And I remember my friend Tara sending me a Facebook message and chewing me out. She was like, and from the moment I did it, I felt like I had missed an opportunity to be better and to do something different and to be part of a different thing. And, but I sat on that for a while. And then I started thinking about what I really felt, what I really believed, what I was really passionate about. And I was really passionate about helping other people around me and in my community. I'm really passionate about healthcare for everyone. I'm really passionate about advocacy and care and the things that I saw happen to me when we were in the hospital with my babies and all of that stuff. The Medicaid, we were protected under a law because of the size and the age of our babies when they were born. We were kept from going into financial destruction because of that protection for us as a middle class family. I can't tell you how much money we would have had in medical bills and all of that jazz without that particular protection. So there's a lot of good things that get thrown into the discussion of, oh my gosh, socialism. Well, you know what? There are some social programs that are beneficial to all of us that we, if you look at it from a different perspective. Anyway, I won't go down that trail yet. But basically the whole point is that I saw things happening in my life. I talked to people. I started really listening to other people and how they felt about things. And it started to make a difference in me. And by the next time the next election came around, because I was home with 3 small kids, I didn't get to go to the school to vote until like 6 o'clock at night. And I stood in line for 2 hours and they had already called the election. And I said, I'm not leaving until I cast this vote because I have to cast this vote. And anyway, over the last 4 years, as things have happened, I've just felt, I've met even more incredible women like Desiree and Nadia and so many other women who I've listened to their stories and I've heard them. And that's really, I want to come back to Desiree again, talking about like just the value of hearing people. And I would love if you would share the story that you shared with us about the African-American woman and the neo-Nazi mom, because to me, that's like you go ahead. It's your story.
Yeah, no, so after the election in 2016, I was you like, to be frank, like a lot of women of color, when the numbers came out and the headlines read essentially that more than 50% of white women voted for Trump, I was like, I'm trying to understand this. Like, I'm just trying to understand it. And so I would walk the streets and literally look at white women, facts, right? And be like, was it you? Was it you? And I realized that I was angry. I was so angry. It just was not helpful. And so I was like, I got to figure this out. I have to figure out how to take this energy and this anger and I would just want to understand why. Like, I'm trying to understand the rationale. And so I began these, we call them these chat and choose now. And we've started here in the States and we've moved globally. But we started to connect with women who, the only thing, to be frank, they would have in common is that they were women. And the goal was really to get an array of different kinds of women together to have honest and frank conversations. We figured we'd do it around food because mostly everyone likes to eat, right? So that kind of, at least creates a little bit more of a congenial environment. Pass me the bread, great. You know what I mean? So we were trying to make food the main function here. And so I started first with, a Black woman who was deeply involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, and a school teacher, and I think someone was in the law enforcement, and then a woman who was a self-described white nationalist, not white supremacist. I learned that there's a difference. That's a whole other podcast. We can talk about that later. But she was, and it all volunteer, right? So no one was paid, right? No one was, and it wasn't recorded. That was something we did on purpose because we wanted folks to feel comfortable and frank and have frank conversations. And so we created this environment, we created this space to have these open, honest dialogues. And instead of starting with where we were different, which was obvious, we started with where we had some commonalities, right? You live in X, Y, and Z community. What is it that you want for your community? What is it that you want for your children? And at the end of, peeling the onion back, we found there were more similarities than there were differences. Interestingly enough, the woman who was a white defined or described white nationalist found out that, a lot of her information had come from people who looked like her, because that's all she lived around was folks who looked like her. And so when she was really kind of caught surprised that the woman who was also involved in Black Lives Matter movement went to Howard Law School and, was very well educated and was also an activist though. And so that just didn't jive with how she understood Black people to be. And we realized that the very fact that folks were sitting across from people that they had already stereotyped in their minds was the first step in trying to break those stereotypes down for folks. And again, food did help, just want to say that. But it allowed folks to feel a little more comfortable in terms of having really honest and frank conversations. And that was a remarkable day for me. And I be frank, and Alexa knows this, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. No clue. All I knew was I was angry. I had to figure out why. I was just trying to bring folks together, and it kind of really ballooned. And we've gone, now how many cities? We've probably gone to over about 20 cities. And we've gone internationally as well. COVID has kind of put a wrench in it a little bit, but technology is amazing, and so the virtual conversations are still happening. But what it's allowed us to do even more is now have larger conversations about systemic racism, implicit bias, and so some of those questions that you were saying, for, Sarah and Nancy, about, what folks are feeling like, I want to do something, but I don't know what, right? I know I should be doing something. So from a civic engagement perspective, I always tell folks, vote. right? And I also want to be clear, when we talk about vote, we're not talking about what's at the top of the ticket only. That's really sexy, right? And, you know, full disclosure, I'm all Biden and Kamala all the way. No, you know, that's no secret. But there's a whole bunch of other folks down that ballot, right? And I think even specifically what the Breonna Taylor situation taught people was that attorney generals are elected. They're not appointed. They are politicians, okay? And as such, their names are on ballots. They have to run campaigns. And so we have the ability to pick those folks the same way we have the ability to pick the judges that someone you know, maybe standing before one day, right? And the idea is to try to get someone in these seats who, you know, forget labels and titles and all that stuff. Someone who understands facts, but also the context in which we exist, right? You want someone to have some cultural competency. You want someone to be aware of the laws, but apply them justly so that the system isn't exacerbated in a way that highlights the systemic racism, right? You want to be able to put folks in these positions that make sense. And so, you know, that's on the civic engagement side. On the other side, which is the work that we do with Chat and Choose, is also, and I tell people, the easiest thing you can do is talk to someone who doesn't look like you. Right? Like if your whole friend base are folk who look like you, even socioeconomically, right? If you all got boats, I mean, try being a friend with someone who doesn't have a boat. Right? I mean,
It's so true.
It's about, you know, really having those frank conversations, but also opening yourself up.
It's interesting because on that note, you know, I used to work in I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and I used to work in a French restaurant there. And one of the dishwasher, his name was Johnny, and he was a Black man, probably in his 50s. And here I am, this 20-year-old girl, you know, or 22-year-old, just graduated college, not a care in the world. And I remember one day asking him, this is my ignorance, I'm like, Johnny, why do you wash dishes? Why don't you do something else, you know? And he told me this story that changed my life. And that sounds really dramatic, but it really did, because I think about Johnny so much every day and how different my world was than his world. I grew up never having to worry about food. College was a given. It's what I was doing, you know, and here I went on and forth. And Johnny told me, he said, I work here because it's the only way I can support my family. I had to drop out of school when I was in 7th grade because my dad died and I had to help raise my brothers and sisters. Then I started having children of my own, and I'm working here so that my son, who's going to graduate high school this year, the first person in our family to graduate high school, can hopefully go to college. And he tells me this whole story, and I'm just like, oh snap, there's a lot about this world that I don't understand. And it had a big impact on me. So to your point, yes, just talking, because I know a lot of people who look at men like Johnny and think that they're lazy. They never went, well, why didn't they go back and get it? Why didn't he get his GED? Anyone can get no, not everyone can get their GED. People that are working 3 jobs to put food on their table cannot go back to school to get their GED. So Johnny was important, and he made a big difference and made me start listening. But I want to get back to the topic of local politics, because that's so important too. And what we do, Sarah mentioned something about, you know, the decisions being made about school and class size. So I want to bring Nadia back into the discussion, because I think it's fascinating that you are running for school board in Bloomingdale. Just kidding, they spelled their signs wrong. And you have a 6-month-old. Yeah. So tell us all about how you decided to run for politics with the baby on your hips, because that's amazing.
You know, and it is. And you know what's interesting is I was thinking about this today because with everything, you know, I work full time, right? So I work full time for Moms Rising, and and you'll see some of my other titles and positions I work on in the book. You know, I'm serving on different boards or organizations. But I was thinking that, you know, I do feel very overwhelmed. But I honestly, I don't feel overwhelmed because I'm running for Board of Education. I don't feel overwhelmed because I'm working full time. I'm feeling overwhelmed because of virtual learning. That's completely my 5-year-old son. There's a reason why there's a 5-year gap between them. He was he's still to this day an extremely high-spirited handful of a child. So that's been my biggest challenge, right? Like, absolutely, like, that has been overwhelming, where it's like, no, we're not getting homework assignments done. I don't have a printer. I can't handwrite all these worksheets they want me to handwrite. Just like not going to happen. So I decided to run. It's kind of interesting. Before COVID happened, I was attending these meetings. My son was in pre-K, and he was at the time in the special ed program because of a speech delay, and so he'd actually been in public school since age 3, right? Which isn't necessarily, we know that unfortunately public pre-K early is not universal. It's not free for the vast majority of Americans, but he was in school. And so I decided I should start going to these Board of Ed meetings because my son is in this district. And as I was going, and then the census was happening, so I was doing some outreach with the census and letting the board know if I could help the school district with any kind of census outreach to parents. So I was doing that, and I was pregnant, I was doing that, and as this was happening, there was a opening on the Board of Education, and an appointment, by appointment, and I applied for it, and I ended up not getting it. And the 2 people they had appointed to this position were in their 80s, old white men in their 80s, who one was came out of retirement to be on this board, and the other one, actually, the board members told me they didn't realize that this person was still alive. And that's who and also I found out that I was easily the most qualified person. My resume spoke for itself, and yet this is again and I mean, I know it was a global pandemic. Maybe you go with who you know. I don't know. I'm not the one who made these decisions. And someone reached out to me and said, I don't want you to feel discouraged because you weren't appointed. You really should consider running. And for me, I'm like, well, you don't have to ask me twice. I always want to see better candidates in office. What Desiree said, I 100,000% believe Sarah. You say, I mean, I think it's, of course, I think we're all in the same boat here with those opinions. But I said, I'm going to run. I mean, the fact that our Board of Ed is 9 people, and only 3 of them have children in the school district, and 2 of those people, their children are a little older, so there's no young parents. There's never been a person of color on the school board ever, and our town is a small town. People think New Jersey is, it's diverse. Of course, it's one of the most diverse states in the country, but obviously that if you get to the bigger cities, you'll see that. But in areas like mine, it's a little more conservative. You're not, there are families of color, but it was actually a very disproportionately not diverse town for a very long time. And I decided to run because I wanted to. I guess I might be a glutton for punishment. I mean, Board of Ed people don't get paid. They often do get the ire of parents, right? I mean, they're I think a Board of Ed's overall, a lot of them, it can be a very challenging position with the public. And but I decided in the middle of COVID to just run. And it's interesting now with the decisions that have been made around education around the country, to open, to not open. New Jersey, was interesting that the governor gave that decision over to the districts to decide for themselves what they wanted to do. And I'm always on the side of, obviously, health, safety, science first. But seeing our district, that there's severely children with severe developmental disabilities that are literally being, there's not even any accommodations. There are not people coming to their homes. They're not. We have a small district. It's not a tightly packed district where students can't space out. You can space out in our schools, and all I keep seeing is a lack of support for families, for children, for parents. And I know for me, this virtual learning has been a complete hot mess, like in every possible way. But I also, for at least in many ways, like you said, I think Sarah, that I have so much luck because I already worked from home before COVID. I had that, right? I was working full time from home. I had that flexibility. Right now, knock on wood, my job is still safe and secure. My family is healthy. I am so lucky to have that. But even with that, there's this struggle. And I just think of other families who are essential workers. I look at my son's class and there's kids who are they're in daycare. So they're in daycare. Daycares are fully open. There's 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds running around. All the daycares in our area are fully open. Like kids are in person in daycare. So these kids are in their daycare with the headphones on, trying so hard to pay attention to this kindergarten teacher. And I just think of how many parents in my town are going to maybe lose their homes by not working. You know, it's very complicated. There's no perfect answer, but I always feel like it's so important to be heard, right? It's so important to have information. And I'm running because I feel like that is not what is happening in this situation. There isn't transformation. There isn't information. Parents are not being made a stakeholder in that process. And for a board of education, that's really a place where parents should be a stakeholder in the process. So I'm running to be a step in the right direction. I'm not going to fix everything. I think any elected person that thinks you're going to fix everything is insane. That's not how it works. You're part of a voting body. But we need to have those leaderships, like we said, on the local level up. We need better leadership. We need stronger leadership. We need moms. We need diverse people. We need the affected communities standing up for themselves instead of other folks speaking on their behalf or making decisions on their behalf.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's actually a great segue into what Nancy wanted to talk about, because if your vote is suppressed, you can't elect people that look like you and represent you. So I'd love for Nancy, and I think Sarah's been doing some of this too. I'm not sure, you two can just pipe in on what you've been doing with the voter suppression.
I have been doing my anti-voter suppression work through an organization called the Religious Action Center, which is part of the Union for Reform Judaism. And they have partnered with an organization called Reclaim Our Vote. Reclaim Our Vote. And Reclaim Our Vote has been doing a very targeted postcarding campaign, reaching out to people who are most at risk of having their vote suppressed. And these are the same people that are least likely to be contacted by phone bankers, by text bankers, or having somebody come to their door. And so obviously, like in a pandemic, nobody is doing door-to-door canvassing, or hardly anybody, I don't think. So the strategy has been to identify those people who may not realize that they have been taken off the voter rolls, and giving them the information that they need to make sure that they're registered to vote. So my postcards have gone to Charleston, North Carolina, Florence, South Carolina. I know there was a big campaign in Texas, and there was a big campaign in Arizona. And so part of the work also has been just opening people's eyes to what voter suppression really looks like, because it's not so obvious to people. For example, voter ID laws on the surface, so what, you have to show your driver's license. Like, what's so bad about that? You know, and then people don't realize, you know, well, what happens if you don't have a driver's license? Or what happens if the address on your driver's license is outdated? Or there's like so many issues with the voter ID laws. I can't even like get into them right now. I can't remember all of them, but there's a lot of bureaucracy involved.
Well, yeah, they can be like a poll tax almost, you know, because they can be very costly in some states, and they're functionally a poll tax.
Yes, basically, because, you know, it costs money to do all of these things. And then other more subtle forms of voter suppression Like, if you've seen the documentary Rigged, where the voter suppression playbook, one of the things that they talk about is people who purge people off the rolls when they can't verify their address, but they make no effort to find those people or reach out to those people to let them know that they're being taken off the roll because of whatever reason, or they take them off the rolls because they didn't vote in the previous election. I mean, there are so many ways, and I highly recommend watching Rigged because it will surprise you. Surprise a lot of people, I think. The lengths to which some groups go to make sure that some people cannot vote.
Yeah, voter intimidation at the polls. I mean, it's just, you know, we had somebody who basically supported it yesterday, but I shall not say his name.
And we saw that last night with Trump trying to imply that there was like voter fraud. And I think Chris Wallace asked a question about how actually a lot of votes are invalidated because the signatures don't match, not because somebody voted in fraudulently. So, so there's been a lot of education in communities like mine to be able to identify voter suppression when we see it and then know what to do about it. So it's a lot of postcarding, a lot of training, and teaching people really, how this process works. How does voting work? It doesn't, it's not as simple as just showing up on election day and, and it's like, and in California especially, I mean, coming from the East Coast, California gave me whiplash because in California you have ballots, you have measures, you have propositions, and a lot of these things are like double negatives, like the proposition to undo a previous proposition. So you have to make sure that your no vote is actually not a yes vote. And, so you can imagine that for somebody that does not have time to really figure out what these ballot measures mean, that is very overwhelming and intimidating. And I would like to go back to voting in a simpler way in Connecticut or New York or something. So a lot of it is just training people to recognize voter suppression when they see it and knowing how to address it. Stacey Abrams, in an interview with somebody, talked about how people need to have a plan, a backup plan, and a backup to the backup plan because she herself ran into some obstacles when she was voting in the most previous election. It was like a midterm election or something. Her ballot envelope was sealed and she couldn't open it because that would invalidate it. So she was gonna vote early. She requested a new one. It didn't come in time. She was gonna vote early, but then she had a family emergency and couldn't vote early. And then she ended up just going to the polls to vote on voting day. So there are a lot of ways in which the system tries to trip you up, and you have to be prepared for that. No matter what your situation is.
I've noticed that a lot of the things that I'm doing for national and state campaigns, I hope they're like educating people a little bit more about a lot of the challenges of remote voting and the way that, some of these laws are really antiquated. And again, like it's a great argument for having better local elections and paying more attention to those because the laws for that get made by like, in some states, part-time job people. Their legislature is only part-time, and our Connecticut legislature, our like state senator has to work like a second job because they only work like 20 hours a week and only for like 6 months a year. So it's kind of funny. Like I've noticed that. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, and you've probably seen in the news that Pennsylvania has the naked ballot issue, which has to do with the way that you have to put it in an envelope before you put it in an envelope, which makes first of all, no sense at all, and is obviously super counterintuitive. Connecticut actually sent us our primary ballots, and it was the same way. And the envelope, so we had these two envelopes, and my husband is holding them, and he goes, these envelopes don't fit in each other. Like, and the window's not lined up. And so we were like, I don't know, how do we do this? And we actually like, kind of like, we're like puzzling it out, like looking on the internet. But I've got to imagine that 99% of the people who sent in their primary ballots, not that Connecticut's primary really mattered, we had nothing that was contested. But like, I can't imagine that like most people were like, oh, I'm going to really do the research for like 20 minutes to figure out which envelope and how it's supposed to be. So seeing all these like weird, wacky laws about how we can vote and how challenging it is to request ballots in some states, when there's other states that have had completely vote by mail elections for a decade. I think there's a real opportunity for the rest of the country to learn from them and see like the common sense laws that they've put in place on a state level and demand better from our legislatures in the years between now and 2024, like assuming that 2024 we're all still here. Like, I think there's just a lot of opportunity to do this work on a state level right now.
I agree. And I mean, I think if the other thing that I kind of want to talk about, we're at about an hour right now. So I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to say what, you know, one last round of our best tips for people or how to get involved, especially if you feel really overwhelmed. But the one thing that I did want to just ask people is whether or not, one of the things that I have seen in the news that's very discouraging to me, because people still do get a lot of their stuff from media sources, from Facebook, from wherever, but don't feel like your vote doesn't matter. I know there's a lot of stuff going on right now that makes people, that's guaranteed to like make people feel like I shouldn't even, it doesn't even matter. Like, oh, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. Oh, it doesn't even matter because Trump said he's going to pull all the electoral votes and the popular vote doesn't matter. So my vote doesn't matter. Well, one, your vote still matters always. And two, the local elections are so important. And so we've said this like 3 times now, so many things happen at the local level, and you can have such a big impact by who you put into the positions that are making the decisions right in your own backyard. So please, please, please take the time to go get your ballot and vote, and think about why you're voting, for whom you are voting. Yeah. Okay. So let's just kind of go back around. We'll start with Nadia, and what is the most important thing that you want people to know in terms of why it's so important to use your voice, to be a part of it, to get involved, and what tips you have for them?
I mean, I think, you know, as I've been canvassing, right, and this is not the first time I've canvassed. The first time I've canvassed for myself, really. People say sometimes, oh, I'm not really into politics, right? Like, oh, I'm not really, it's so dirty and all this other stuff. But I always say, if you're not into politics, politics is still into you, because every decision from, and I think about this, the zoning, streetlights, your child's education, systemic racism, like everything, Jim Crow, like that was, everything is a law that somebody decided somewhere. Everything was decided by somebody somewhere. And the question is, do you want to be part of those decisions? Do you want to have a say in those decisions? Do you want to fight to have a say in those decisions? To me, the answer is yes. And it's so important also, again, coming from me, my family, I'm the first person in my family, my direct family, to be born in this country, and to not have the trauma of the immigrant experience. And I just think about what it means for so many of our communities to feel part of this nation, to be part of their communities, to be part of their neighborhoods, and how important it is for not just them, but for our nation, that our different communities are at the table, not just at the table, bringing their own table, whatever, like, but are there and are part of the towns they're in, the neighborhoods they're in, the cities they're in. It's so important to have that representation. It's so important to have that voice. My tip for anybody is, and I always hear this, friends reach out, maybe it's a mom who's busy, she's, oh, Nadia, I'm not really an activist, or, oh, I'm not really political. It's like, I don't even know where to start. I hear that constantly. I don't know where to start. And I say the fact that you want to do anything and the fact that you're even asking me that question is showing me that you're starting somewhere. And I always tell people this, that I didn't know where to start either. I did not come from a political family. I did not, no, none of that. Okay, like my parents are not politicians. They're not high-powered lawyers. That's not at all my story. You know, I learned by doing. I learned by caring. I feel like if you have the urge and the interest to want to do something, even if you don't know exactly what that looks like, you are on your way. You are starting. And I always tell people there are no grown-ups running this. There are no experts running this, okay? I'm like there are no experts in charge of this bus, all right? It is people running it. So my tip is never think less of yourself for being new to this. Never think less of yourself for not knowing the answers of where you're starting. Know that your value, the fact that you're interested, your voice has a value, and that the fact that you want to do something is that spark, and it is priceless, and that will take you far beyond what you could even imagine, but you're starting somewhere.
Thank you. That's great advice. And I will say, additionally, that was part of the reason that we wrote the book. That's really hard to see. But part two is, how do you get involved? Because not only did we want to share stories of why it's important to be involved, but we wanted to help moms who want to get involved have some ideas on what to do next. So there is some of that in the book. And I forgot to mention it at the beginning, but the 5 of us are going to come up with an organization that we feel is a good place for us to put any any profits from the book. We're going to donate to an organization that we pick. So I have a feeling between Nadia and Desiree, all these ladies, that there will be a very good suggestion of where we can put any donations. So we do want to give back to help move these things forward. All right, Desiree.
Ooh, well, I'm excited. I had to write down some notes so I could get everything together in my head. I was like, there's so much stuff. Oh my goodness. First, Nadia, good luck. You are going to kill it. Okay. So I just want to say that. And then, to what you were saying, politics and government is extremely important, whether you're involved or not, and I always tell this story. Politics and government decide what water is in your faucet and whether it's clean. Just ask the city of Flint. How safe you are. Just ask Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. How your kids are educated. Just ask any parent right now who has kids in any state. Right? So these are just some realities about how government and politics together are in your life, right? I mean, most of us pay taxes, hopefully more than $750. But I digress. So, that's also, government and politics right there. And so I always tell folks, what can you do right now? I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved in this book and connect with all these women here is because I know I have a lot of conversations with women trying to figure out, what can I do? How can I help? And have really frank conversations with mothers who are like, my day-to-day in my own life is hard enough, right? I don't have the time or the bandwidth to go here, do that, do this, and do that. And that's real talk, particularly for, and specifically for, women of color. I was raised by a single mother. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. My mother didn't have a lot of extra time. The time that she did have, though, she poured in us in education. And so I do know that that's a real challenge for folks in terms of time management, but also understanding how you can't just do everything. So I say to those moms, to those women, but also men too, right, who are trying to figure out where they fit in this whole thing. You want to figure out how to get your seat at the table. As Shirley Chisholm said, and she was the first African-American congresswoman to be elected to Congress, 1968 for New York 12th District. She said, if you are trying to get a seat at the table and they won't give it to you, bring a folding chair, right? And that means so many different things. And what that means is there's no one right way to be involved, right? You don't have to ask permission either, right? And you have to figure out what that looks like for you. And the most easiest thing to do right now, that is both civically responsible, but as our kids are watching who we are as mothers, as parents, as stewards in this society, is the power of our vote, right? And that is from the top of the ballot to the, down the ticket. So for folks who are interested in knowing if you're registered, I would double, triple, quadruple check, just because stuff is changing quickly. Go to iwillvote.com, and there you will know if you need to register, if you've moved, what early, what has your polling site moved. There are two things happening right now in this country when we talk about voting, and that is, these are different times. You have to make a plan. Back in the day, you didn't have to make a plan. You went after work, maybe you went before work, maybe you went during your lunch, and it was just a thing you did. You have to make a plan now just because things are different, right? And if you can vote early, get it out the way. Just do it, right? That's one less thing you have to do, because we have a whole bunch of other things we got to do. Like now I have to figure out how to make dinner real late. I don't know what we're going to have. I have no idea. But I say all that to say that you make your plan. If you make your plan early, that's one less thing you have to do. So iwillvote.com, make a plan to vote early if you can. And we are stewards for this generation, for our kids, in terms of defining how we want them to grow up and view this world and how we want them to see themselves, right? So it's extremely important that we mimic those activities that we are teaching and trying to impart on our kids. And so for that, I say, if you don't know what to do something, but the most simplest thing you can do right now is vote.
And I just to piggyback on that, like they watch, they see it, they mimic what we do every single day. I know this because they repeat every bad thing I've ever said out loud. So they are, and I miss the days of being able to go to in-person events, bigger events, and I know some things are still happening, but I'm not quite ready to take my kids out to them. But one of the most important things that we ever did, I think, was last year when I took my kids to a rally that our teachers had at the State House because of some things that were happening with education. And it was so empowering, I think, even though I don't know that my kids got it at the time, but I feel like that's going to be one of those memories, like my soup kitchen memory, when my parents took me to a soup kitchen. Like one day down the road, I'm going to see my daughters, with a sign or at a march or doing something, Lord willing that we make it through to that point. And when someone asks them why they're involved, they're going to say, because I remember being in a sea of red with all my teachers and my mom chanting at the State House why they needed better pay and better things like that. So anyway, yes, they're watching us. They want to be us. They want to be like us. So let's show them that it is so important to vote. And I had my kids watch a little bit of the debate last night until we just couldn't. But even participating in part of that was important. So, all right, Nancy.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit and talk about, I think that one of the hardest things as moms that we deal with is just the guilt of wanting to devote so much time to these causes, and the kids saying, like, you have a meeting every night. Why do you have a meeting every night? And oh my God, are you still on that meeting? Are you done yet? And I really try to temper that, and but I think that I have finally reached a point where I'm okay with feeling guilty, I guess, but it's not something that holds me back anymore. And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's a great documentary about Dolores Huerta, who was an organizer of migrant workers in California. And one of the most striking things of that documentary was that she was fairly middle class, I think, and she had 7 or 11 children. I can't remember. She had a lot of children, And she left her comfortable middle-class existence and moved her kids to like farm country to live among the migrant workers because she was helping to organize them. And in the documentary, her children are grown, and they talk about how angry they were at her and how resentful they felt. And, she had uprooted them. She was never around. She like completely devoted her life to this cause. She was working with Cesar Chavez. He gets all the credit, but she did most of the organizing, which is, part of the course, right? So, and so watching that, I was really struck. I was like, I'm not doing, nothing I'm doing is on that scale. Like, why, she didn't feel guilty. I'm not gonna feel guilty because, sometimes you have to be in the service of a greater cause because you're doing it for your children. So that would be, I think, one of my many messages, I think, is that you just have to let go of the guilt. You're a mom, but you're allowed to be more than a mom. You're allowed to be a mom that has interest. You're allowed to be a mom with passion. You are allowed to be a mom that shows your children what it is to be a productive member of society and show them what you're really worth. That you're not here just to serve them. So, as I say, as somebody who gave them mac and cheese for dinner last night and for lunch today, I was like, here, mac and cheese for lunch.
Oh, they probably loved it. My kids are always like, can we have mac and cheese? Yeah.
So, so just let go of it and just do the best you can. Lose the cape. You're not expected to be a superhero, but don't hold yourself back and just do whatever is in your capacity to do at this moment in your life. So, and I can't say what's going to happen when this pandemic is over and all these meetings are happening in person again. I have a pretty good idea, but I'm going to try, So I guess that's my tip is, stop beating yourself up, forgive yourself. And if you feel guilty, you feel guilty, but don't let it hold you back. It doesn't make you a bad person. And your kids will understand when they get older, hopefully.
Or they'll be in therapy like everybody's going to be anyway. So, I mean, at least maybe we'll point them somewhere in the right direction. But okay, Sarah.
Yeah. So, if I actually Desiree, I had to take notes because guys, it's exciting talking to other moms who are thinking about these things right now. So first of all, I want to say in concert with what Nancy was saying, also, don't be embarrassed to be a mom. Bring your kids places. It is not the job of your kids to not be present in your community. They're allowed to be there. They are citizens. They belong in the public places. You don't need to be embarrassed about breastfeeding in a meeting. You don't need to be embarrassed that your kid's watching an embarrassing toy video on your cell phone. You don't need to be embarrassed when your kid's eating a cracker. I had somebody try and throw me out of a caucus once because my kids were with me, and I got threatened and told, if your kids make any noise, we're going to make you leave. And I said, yeah, so first of all, you can't. So and they're not going to make any noise because I gave them their Kindles and that's all they really want. They don't want a parent. So anyway, just don't be embarrassed and don't be ashamed to take your kids places. And I think that's something that is used to disenfranchise women so frequently and take our voices away. In states, the numbers and people who attend caucuses is caucuses in states where you have to physically go in to vote really disenfranchise women because women can't come to them with little kids because the kids will freak out if they have to be in a room for 11 hours with a bunch of Iowa people jamming about what they think the merits of Elizabeth Warren are. It's not going to happen. So like, we need to demand an environment where we can bring our kids and be full citizens as caretakers, and also demand from our partners and the men in our lives the support that we need to be able to be active citizens. I know that, like, if I could leave people with some ideas about how to get involved and do things that are meaningful in your community that are also small, pay for local journalism. Pay for it every time you can, because your local journalism sources are dying. That is why you don't know what the good candidates are like. You don't know what your community, like, you don't have like information about your local first selectman or mayor, because local journalism is dying. So pay for it every chance you can. And if you cannot, if it's already gone, think about starting a community newspaper yourself with friends. Think about starting, joining the League of Women Voters, which provides great voter information and resources in a nonpartisan way to your community, especially about local candidates. Think about doing something if they're not like active. Think about even starting a voter education project in your own community about local elections, which is something that we did here in Reading, where I live. And we ended up, we sent candidates questionnaires before a municipal election and said, hey, what's your opinion about these like very specific things about our town? And then we published them on a website and shared it around social media. This is all something you can do with just a couple friends, and it doesn't take quitting your job or anything over it. I would also say that, like, you can, especially because of the pandemic and distance learning, I found myself with a lot of time that I can't like dig into in a meaningful way for work. Sorry, Alexa, because I do some work for Alexa, so no offense. But there are times where I just like the talking and the meets, and I have this one scheduled and this one, and I have a kindergartner, and it's virtual learning for a kindergartner is like not a thing. So I found that I can use these like kind of quirky, I can't concentrate on anything minutes so productively right now, though, in an election year. Vote Forward, votefwd.org is a website I'd send you to. They're sending letters to voters, infrequent voters, often disenfranchised voters, all over the country, and they're sending them on October 17th, like millions of letters, personalized from you. They give you a thing, you print it out, you write a personal message in there, nonpartisan, sign your name, you put it in an envelope, put it in the postage, and it's off to somebody to encourage them to vote, because we know you're going to vote. So you need to encourage everybody you know to vote. And here's some way to encourage people you don't know to vote. Then I would recommend Postcards to Voters, which is super easy to get started with. You just need to text the word hello to 484 Ask Abby, ABBY. And so that's 484-275-2229. And that is an organization that sends out, I mean, it is partisan campaign. They get involved in specific races at the invitation of the people running. And it can be everything. They do it all the time, year round. Like the Wisconsin, you know, in a lot of states, they elect judges. They get involved in local judicial elections, which is how we get, you know, adequate justice served in our justice system in these places where they elect judges rather than letting them be nominated and actually qualified. So it's a really important thing to think about, and they run year round. You can text that number any day of the week and you can probably get a campaign to write for. And I've been doing it for literally years. Another great place to start if you don't feel like you want to get involved in electoral politics necessarily is your local PTA. Every PTA at a state level is out there doing lobbying and advocacy for every child in their state. And in some states, especially if you live in a state that has education in crisis, your state PTA is out there speaking for the kids, all the kids. And they have lobbyists and they are advocating constantly. The national PTA is advocating constantly to our national government and our federal government to talk to them about issues like gun control. They have spoken on issues of equity in education, So it's a really great place to get involved too. And they do often get involved in your local education policy as well, in a nonpartisan way. So that's another great opportunity. And I say that as somebody who is on the Connecticut PTA's legislative committee. And I can tell you that truly, like, our voice is so needed constantly. So it's a great opportunity if that's something you're looking for. These are all things you can do in those little moments. And I really believe that those little moments that we're taking right now to have conversations, to write postcards, to, sit at a table and share information with people, to register voters, to do all these little things is what can turn the tide. I really believe that women are the people who are going to do the job this time. I think that we can do it together. And I am really hoping that as a white woman, I'm hoping that white women will come through for a change and do what we need to do to, really speak for all of our children. So I think there's so much opportunity to get involved and so much to do. So thank you guys so much I learned so much. And thank you, Nadia, for mentioning Moms Rising. That is an amazing organization. I have a good friend who's really involved with it in North Carolina. It's awesome.
Yes, we love Moms Rising. I need to go do another post for them. It's been a long time. Oh my gosh, ladies, this was amazing. I knew it would be. You all have so much to bring to it, and we could talk for so long about so many issues. But really, I mean, I think just to recap, one, talk to people that aren't like you. Hear stories, learn from other people. Because I want to say one thing. I had a really interesting discussion this morning with people I will not name, and I was getting really fired up. We were talking about the debate last night, and I was really disappointed. And as I thought about it throughout my day, that the thought popped up to me that the reason a lot of people that I know aren't really excited about a lot of these issues and aren't really that nervous or scared about it is because they are living, and I know I'm going to catch some flack for this, so I'm really sorry. I mean this in the most loving way, but in a please open your eyes way. If nothing that's happening right now is bothering you, it's because you are living the definition of white privilege. If you're not scared about some of these issues, it's because you've never been impacted by those issues. And that is the big picture definition. It's not about your socioeconomic status. It's not about how hard you work to get your grades to get a scholarship for college. It's not about all of those things. It's about not being worried about somebody being in office because it doesn't day-to-day impact you in a way that scares you and hurts you and makes you feel disenfranchised as part of this country. And I guess my plea when I'm asking what people are doing right now is that you really have that gut check. Let me be the Tara to you. Let me say why. Why are you making these choices? Like she said to me. In fact, her exact words were, "When did you become an old white man?" And I was like, oh, ouch. Just think about why you're making the choices that you make and what is important to you and what you value for you and what you value to have available for your children and your future. And finally, if you haven't watched The Handmaid's Tale, maybe that's the step that will push you over the edge. Because, all joking aside, like wherever you stand on the beliefs, it starts local. It starts by really understanding what's happening around you and what can happen around you. It starts with making relationships and talking to other women that aren't like you. And all I can say is it's been incredible to me to get to know people and to hear their stories and to be a part of something different. And Desiree, thank you so much for the many, many conversations that we have had and the time that we've spent together. And everybody needs a Desiree in their life.
I'm here But I'm also here because I want the world to be a better place for my daughter too, right? So that's extremely important for me. I do this work because it's much bigger than myself. But I'd be remiss, my husband's on the line. I want to give a shout out. We were talking about, support systems as well. And my husband understands the work that I do, the time away from family, and the commitment that I have for our family, which is why sometimes I'm not making dinner every single night. And so he's on the line, but I just want to give a shout out to him. And my sister is also on the line. We talk about community, which is extremely important. So thank you guys for allowing me to be part of this and to be part of the book as well.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I wish we could continue this conversation, but we should maybe do this again on a regular basis, because our work isn't going to stop on November 4th. Is that the Tuesday this year? I don't even know. I'm voting by mail, so dates are irrelevant. November 3rd. Don't show up on the 4th. Get there on the 3rd.
Get there before the 3rd. Yes.
Get in there before the 3rd. Go to what's the name of this site while I have it pulled up here. Oh shoot, I don't have it up here. There is a site that it's on Facebook all the time. If you haven't gotten this ad for this site, this voter registration site, it's on there, but you can just Google how to get my ballot, how to get my absentee ballot. Almost here.
IWillVote.com has it too.
Okay, great. Almost every state now, South Carolina was one of the last ones to move into it, but I think almost every state now has allowed you to submit a ballot by mail because of state of emergency. So please do it. And there's a question. Nancy wanted to ask a question. So before we leave there, and anyone who wants to ask a question, ladies, Nadia, I know you have a very small child at home. If you need to hop off, you can. Feel free to do that. But there were a couple of questions if people want to hit those. So.
Well, Jocelyn asked about where to get unbiased information about candidates and issues and stuff, and I have found, in addition to the League of Women Voters site, votersedge.org right now for me has the most comprehensive, unbiased information at federal, state, and local level, school districts too. So votersedge.org, and usually I think it's just / and then whatever your state initials are. So like mine is /CA for California. But more importantly than that is, if you live in a state where, like in California, if you live in a state where members of the community can put forth measures or propositions, you want to take a look at who is sponsoring those. So, for example, here in California, we have a measure on the ballot that would make things that are currently a misdemeanor into a felony. And when you look at who is sponsoring that measure, it's very easy to see why you might vote against it, because a lot of people say, well, if this group is sponsoring this piece of legislation, then I know I have to vote against it because my values do not align with the values of this group, whatever it is. So I would encourage you, in addition to looking up your candidates and who's running and what other kinds of measures or pieces of legislation that you might be voting on, really dig deep and follow the money and look at who is putting the money behind these things, and then decide how you're going to vote on those. Yes, always follow the money.
Yeah, and don't necessarily trust the name of the organization, because it's always like, Committee to Save Trees by paid for by a lumber company, and their goals are to burn every tree in the world. So you can't just look at the name.
Yes. Look at what's behind the name. That is one of the most, I think, useful lessons that I have learned moving to California, is you really have to be careful what you're voting for. Just because it was put forth by a citizen doesn't mean that it's in your best interest.
Yeah. That is so very true. Now, we threw so much stuff out at everyone tonight. So don't be overwhelmed, because that's what happens sometimes is you're like, oh, I can't do it all. So I'm just going to stop. I'm not going to do anything. Just start with something small or one issue that you're passionate about, and learn about it and see how you can get involved on that issue. Okay, I would like really quickly, if we have a moment, since the three of us, Nancy, Sarah, and I represent the Lose the Cape community, but since you mentioned Moms Rising in the comment, which are people who are watching on Facebook didn't hear that, Nadia, if you want to give a shout out about Moms Rising, it's such a fantastic organization.
Yes, you know, as we were talking about getting involved, I mean, sometimes with Moms Rising, I feel like I innately just bring it with me into the space. I was like, no, I need to always mention it. But absolutely, momsrising.org is a really wonderful place to, if you want to get involved as a first-time activist, if you want to continue with your activism. It's just one thing I love about Moms Rising is it's a space where you can be as involved or as involved as you'd like, or to take baby steps of involvement. If that means that you want to just sign some petitions that we will deliver. I literally deliver these to Congress, okay? So your signature does go somewhere, and we target it. Like maybe it'll go directly to your Congress member of Congress, or directly to your senator in Alabama, if you're in Alabama. So, you know, if the signature petition is, if you're busy and that's what you can do, that you can do that. If you mentioned your friend in North Carolina, Sarah, leading mom groups. When it wasn't COVID, we were doing, you know, Hill visits, advocacy visits, mom meetups. But now, you know, one thing we've done in the past and are doing now, and it is very COVID friendly, was this massive postcard writing campaign that just took off, and moms sending postcards to other voters in different states, urging them to come out, urging them to vote. So even for this election, I would strongly suggest anybody go to momsrising.org. You know, Moms Rising is 501c3, it's a C4. We're political but nonpartisan. So, but we are progressive. Like, I'm not going to say we're not a progressive organization. Unfortunately, you know, every issue has become politicized, but we aren't supporting any kind of partisan agenda, right? We do political work, and I would say go to our site, see how you can get involved with Moms Vote, and we need moms to vote. When moms vote, we can change the world. I don't just believe that, it's just true.
I 100% agree, 100%. And Desiree, if you want to let people know where they can find you, more information on the chat and choose. You said you were doing them socially distanced. Are you doing any of them like in a Zoom room, or where people can join from all over?
So they've been very targeted right now, to be honest, and a little partisan. So, so we're going to, you know, after November, we'll have, it's kind of the broader, we'll go back to the essence of what Chat and Choose were. For now, that they have been, quite frankly, we've been holding space for a lot of women who have been struggling with the news of existing as women of color, as moms, as women in movement space. And so that's how we've been doing that Chat and Choose specifically. But we will be doing another Chat and Choose before the end of the year. It will be socially distanced. It will be in December. We're trying to figure out where. We'll definitely be on the East Coast. And you can go to www.desireepeterkinbell.com to find out more information. The locations will be posted there. You can follow me on Twitter at DPBell. That's where I'm a rabble-rouser. Sorry. And follow us on Facebook at DP Bell and Associates. And then I am also on Instagram as well, Desiree Peterkin Bell. That's a private account because that allows me to get out a lot of my frustration. So
yes,
so that's where you can find me. And I'm excited to connect with anyone. Actually, from now, we have about 34 days from now until election. But like I said before, if you can, make a plan. If you can, vote early. Connect online with iwillvote.com to see what your status is and if you need to do anything different, particularly in your city or state.
Say that one more time, that site.
iwillvote.com.
iwillvote.com. That's really important because I think, to Nancy's point, sometimes people are deregistered and don't even know they've been deregistered. So always good to know what your status is. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You all are amazing women. You're doing so much, and you just took out an hour and 45 minutes of your time on a night where you probably couldn't afford to give us an hour and 45 minutes. So I appreciate it. And I know we're all doing really good things in our world right now. And I just don't want to end this conversation. So somebody else say goodbye, because no, you say goodbye. I can't say goodbye. You say goodbye. All right. Have a great night. Thank you for everyone who joined us.
Heal.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good night.